The morning sun blazed over Riverside Heights, California, casting long shadows across the pristine streets where million-dollar homes sat behind perfectly manicured lawns. 22-year-old Marcus Thompson jogged along the tree-lined sidewalk, his Nike running shoes hitting the pavement in a steady rhythm. Sweat glistened on his dark skin as he maintained the pace that had made him one of the most promising young basketball players in the country. Marcus had just finished his junior year at UCLA, where he'd led the Bruins to the Sweet 16 and earned all Pac-12 honors. NBA scouts were already circling, projecting him as a potential lottery pick in next year's draft. But despite his rising fame and the scholarship that covered his education, Marcus remained grounded, still preferring his morning runs through the quiet neighborhoods near campus to the chaos of the gym. His water bottle, clipped to his running belt, had been empty for the last mile. The California heat was unforgiving, even at 8 in the morning, and dehydration was no joke for an athlete of his caliber. Up ahead, he spotted a small convenience store tucked between a dry cleaner and a coffee shop. Perfect. What Marcus didn't know was that this particular store had been the target of several recent break-ins, and the local police had increased their patrols in the area. What he also didn't know was that officers Derek Sullivan and Tony Martinez had been sitting in their patrol car across the street for the past hour, growing increasingly bored and irritable in the heat. Sullivan, a 15-year veteran of the Riverside Heights Police Department, had a reputation that preceded him. At 42, he carried himself with the swagger of someone who believed his badge made him untouchable. His personnel file, locked away in the department's administrative offices, contained a troubling pattern: 17 complaints of excessive force and racial profiling over the past 5 years. Each complaint had been dismissed or resulted in nothing more than a written reprimand, thanks to the department's culture of protecting its own and Sullivan's connections within the police union. Martinez, younger and newer to the force, often found himself uncomfortable with his partner's methods but had learned to stay quiet. Speaking up against a senior officer was a career killer, and Martinez had a family to support. As Marcus approached the store, he noticed the patrol car but thought nothing of it. He'd grown up in a middle-class family in Oakland, where his father had taught him to always be respectful to law enforcement, even when they weren't respectful in return. His mother, a high school principal, had drilled into him the importance of staying calm and compliant, no matter what. What Marcus's parents had never told him was the full extent of his father's success. David Thompson had built his technology empire from nothing, starting with a small software company in his garage 25 years ago. Today, Thompson Industries was worth over $3 billion, with offices in 12 countries and contracts with major corporations worldwide. David had deliberately kept his wealth private, wanting his children to grow up with normal values and work ethic. Marcus knew his family was comfortable, but he had no idea they were among the wealthiest black families in America. The bell above the convenience store door chimed as Marcus entered. The elderly Korean store owner, Mr. Park, looked up from his newspaper and smiled. He'd seen Marcus before during his morning runs and appreciated that the young man was always polite and respectful. "Good morning," Marcus said, heading straight for the refrigerated section. He grabbed a large bottle of water and a sports drink, knowing he still had 3 miles left in his run. "You training for something special?" Mr. Park asked as Marcus approached the counter. "Always training," Marcus replied with a grin. "Season starts in a few months." As he paid for his drinks, Marcus noticed Mr. Park glancing nervously toward the window. Following his gaze, Marcus saw the 2 officers getting out of their patrol car, their attention focused directly on the store. "They've been out there for a while," Mr. Park said quietly. "Ever since the break-in started, they watch everyone who comes in here." Marcus nodded, understanding the implication. He'd experienced enough profiling in his 22 years to recognize the signs. But he'd done nothing wrong, and he wasn't about to let paranoia ruin his morning routine. The officers entered just as Marcus was pocketing his change. Sullivan's eyes immediately locked onto him, scanning him from head to toe with the kind of scrutiny that made Marcus's skin crawl. Martinez followed behind, his expression more neutral but equally watchful. "Morning, officers," Mr. Park said, his voice carrying a slight tremor. Sullivan ignored the greeting, his attention entirely focused on Marcus. "You," he said, pointing directly at the young athlete. "I need to see some ID." Marcus felt his stomach tighten, but he kept his voice calm. "Is there a problem, officer?" "I asked for ID, not questions," Sullivan snapped, his hand moving to rest on his belt near his handcuffs. "I was just buying water," Marcus said, holding up the bottle. "Mr. Park can confirm that." "Don't tell me what he can confirm," Sullivan said, stepping closer. "We've had reports of suspicious activity in this area. Young black males matching your description." The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Marcus felt the familiar burn of anger in his chest, but his mother's voice echoed in his head, "Stay calm, stay alive, fight the system later." "I'm happy to show you my ID," Marcus said, reaching slowly toward his back pocket where he kept his wallet. "Hands where I can see them." Sullivan barked, his voice so loud that Mr. Park jumped behind the counter. Marcus immediately raised his hands, his water bottle still clutched in his right hand. "Officer, I was just reaching for my wallet like you asked." "Turn around and face the wall," Sullivan commanded, his partner now moving to flank Marcus from the other side. "This is unnecessary," Marcus said, but he complied, placing his hands against the wall next to the candy display. Martinez looked uncomfortable, glancing between his partner and the young man who was clearly cooperating. "Sullivan, maybe we should just check his ID first." "I'll handle this," Sullivan cut him off, moving behind Marcus. "Spread your legs." As Sullivan began to pat him down roughly, Marcus caught Mr. Park's eye in the reflection of the store's security mirror. The older man was reaching for something under the counter, probably his phone to record what was happening. "I'm a student at UCLA, Marcus said, trying to keep his voice steady as Sullivan's hands moved aggressively across his body. "I'm on the basketball team." "You can verify that." "Sure you are," Sullivan said with a sneer. "And I'm LeBron James." The pat-down was unnecessarily thorough and deliberately humiliating. Sullivan took his time, making sure Marcus felt every moment of powerlessness. When he found Marcus's wallet, he yanked it out roughly. "Marcus Thompson," Sullivan read from the driver's license. "UCLA student ID, basketball team card." He paused, studying the cards with obvious disappointment. Well. Looks like you're telling the truth about that part." "Can I turn around now?" Marcus asked. "No," Sullivan said flatly. "We still need to verify you didn't steal anything." "I have the receipt," Marcus said, his patience wearing thin despite his best efforts. "Receipts can be faked," Sullivan replied, though they both knew how ridiculous that sounded for a $3 purchase. Martinez shifted uncomfortably. "Sullivan, he's got valid ID, he's a college student, and the store owner isn't claiming anything was stolen." "Are you questioning my judgment, Martinez?" Sullivan's voice carried a clear threat. Martinez fell silent, but his expression showed his growing discomfort with the situation. That's when Marcus made a decision that would change everything. Instead of continuing to submit to the harassment, he turned around slowly, keeping his hands visible. "Officer Sullivan," he said, reading the name tag, "I've been respectful and cooperative. I've shown you my ID, I have a receipt for my purchase, and I've done nothing wrong. I'd like to leave now." Sullivan's face flushed red with anger. "Did I say you could turn around?" "I'm not under arrest," Marcus replied calmly. "And unless you have probable cause to detain me, I have the right to leave." The words hit Sullivan like a slap. Here was this young black man, in his neighborhood, in his store, having the audacity to quote his rights. The rage that had been simmering beneath the surface finally boiled over. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back," Sullivan commanded, reaching for his handcuffs. "For what?" Marcus asked, his voice rising slightly. "What crime am I being arrested for?" "Resisting arrest," Sullivan said, grabbing Marcus's arm and spinning him around with unnecessary force. "You can't arrest someone for resisting arrest if there was no lawful arrest to begin with," Marcus said, but he didn't physically resist as Sullivan yanked his arms behind his back. The handcuffs clicked into place, tighter than necessary. Marcus winced as the metal bit into his wrists. "You people always think you know the law," Sullivan muttered, loud enough for everyone in the store to hear. Mr. Park, who had been recording on his phone, spoke up. "Officer, this young man did nothing wrong. I saw everything." "Mind your own business," Sullivan snapped at him. As they marched Marcus toward the door, he caught sight of his reflection in the store window. A young black man in handcuffs, being led away by two white officers for the crime of buying water while black. The image burned itself into his memory. Outside, a small crowd had gathered. Word traveled fast in the age of social media, and several people were already recording with their phones. Marcus heard someone call out, "This is wrong," but Sullivan seemed oblivious to the growing audience. They reached the patrol car, and Sullivan opened the back door. As he pushed Marcus's head down to guide him into the seat, Marcus spoke quietly. "Officer, you're making a mistake you're going to regret." Sullivan laughed harshly. "The only mistake here is you thinking you can mouth off to a police officer." As the car door slammed shut, Marcus sat back against the hard plastic seat, his hands still cuffed behind him. The metal was cutting into his wrists, and his shoulders ached from the awkward position. But his mind was clear, focused on what he needed to do next. Sullivan got into the driver's seat, Martinez beside him. As they pulled away from the store, Sullivan was already on the radio, spinning his version of events. "Unit 47 to dispatch. We have one in custody for disorderly conduct and resisting arrest. Suspect was acting suspiciously at the convenience store on Maple Street." Marcus listened to the lies with growing anger, but he forced himself to stay calm. He had one advantage that Sullivan didn't know about, one card he hadn't played yet. "I need to make a phone call," Marcus said as they pulled into the police station parking lot. "You'll get your call when we're ready to give it to you," Sullivan replied, clearly enjoying his position of power. "I'm entitled to a phone call immediately upon arrest," Marcus said. "That's not a privilege, it's a right." Sullivan turned in his seat, his eyes cold. "You know what your problem is? You think because you go to some fancy college and play basketball, you're special. But in here, you're just another punk who couldn't follow simple instructions." As they walked Marcus into the station, heads turned. The sight of a young black man in handcuffs wasn't unusual, but something about this particular arrest felt different. Maybe it was Marcus's calm demeanor, or the way he carried himself despite the restraints, but several officers found themselves paying closer attention than usual. Sergeant Patricia Williams, a 20-year veteran and one of the few black supervisors in the department, looked up from her paperwork as they brought Marcus through. Her eyes narrowed as she took in the scene. "What's the charge?" she asked Sullivan directly. "Disorderly conduct, resisting arrest," Sullivan replied, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Sergeant Williams studied Marcus, noting his UCLA basketball team t-shirt, his expensive running shoes, and most importantly, his composed demeanor. "What exactly did he do?" "Got belligerent when we tried to question him about suspicious activity," Sullivan said. "I bought water and asked to leave when the questioning became harassment," Marcus said calmly, speaking directly to Sergeant Williams. She looked between the two men, her expression thoughtful. "Process him," she said finally, but her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced by Sullivan's story. As they moved toward the booking area, Marcus spoke up again. "Sergeant, I need to make my phone call now." After processing, Sullivan interjected. "No," Sergeant Williams said firmly. "He gets his call now. That's department policy." Sullivan's jaw tightened, but he couldn't argue with a direct order from a supervisor. They led Marcus to a phone mounted on the wall in a small room adjacent to the booking area. Marcus looked at the phone for a moment, then dialed a number he'd memorized years ago but had never used in a situation like this. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Thompson Industries, David Thompson's office." "Dad," Marcus said quietly, "I need your help." The silence on the other end of the line lasted only a few seconds, but Marcus could feel the shift in energy even through the phone. "Where are you?" David Thompson's voice was calm, but Marcus could hear the steel underneath. "Riverside Heights Police Station. I was arrested for buying water." Another pause. "Are you hurt?" "No, sir. But they handcuffed me pretty tight, and the officer who arrested me has some serious issues." "I'm on my way," David said. "Don't say anything else until I get there." "Dad," Marcus said before his father could hang up, "you might want to bring the lawyers." 20 minutes later, the first sign that something had changed came in the form of a phone call to the police chief's direct line. Chief Robert Martinez, no relation to Officer Martinez, was in the middle of a budget meeting when his secretary knocked on the door. "Chief, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you have an urgent call from the mayor's office." Chief Martinez excused himself from the meeting and took the call in private. What he heard made his blood run cold. "Chief, this is Mayor Davidson. I just received a very interesting phone call from David Thompson." "Do you know who that is?" The chief's mind raced. The name sounded familiar, but he couldn't place it immediately. "Thompson Industries," the mayor continued. $3 billion in annual revenue. Major employer in our city. Significant contributor to political campaigns, including mine. His son was apparently arrested this morning for buying water." The chief felt his stomach drop. "I'll look into it immediately." "You do that," the mayor said. "And Chief? Mr. Thompson is on his way to your station with his legal team. I suggest you handle this very carefully." As the chief hung up, he was already reaching for his jacket. This was about to become the longest day of his career. Meanwhile, in the booking area, Officer Sullivan was growing increasingly frustrated with Marcus's calm demeanor. Most people he arrested were either angry, scared, or trying to bargain their way out. Marcus just sat quietly, answering questions with minimal responses and showing no signs of the intimidation Sullivan was used to seeing. "You know," Sullivan said as he took Marcus's fingerprints, "attitude like yours is what gets people in trouble." "What attitude is that?" Marcus asked. "Acting like you're better than everyone else. Like the rules don't apply to you." Marcus looked at him steadily. "The only rule I expect to apply to me is equal treatment under the law." Sullivan's grip on Marcus's hand tightened as he pressed his fingers to the ink pad. "Equal treatment? You want to know about equal treatment? I've been doing this job for 15 years. I've seen every kind of criminal there is. And you know what I've learned? Respect is earned, not given." "I agree," Marcus said. "So when do you plan to start earning it?" The question hit Sullivan like a physical blow. His face flushed red, and for a moment, Marcus thought the officer might actually strike him. Instead, Sullivan leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You think you're smart? You think your college degree makes you special? Let me tell you something, boy. In here, I'm the one with the power. And if you keep running your mouth, you're going to find out just how much power I have." The threat was clear, and Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. But before he could respond, Sergeant Williams appeared in the doorway. "Sullivan, you're needed in the chief's office. Now." Sullivan straightened, confusion flickering across his face. "I'm in the middle of booking. Officer Martinez can finish. The chief wants to see you immediately." As Sullivan left, Marcus caught Sergeant Williams's eye. She studied him for a moment, then spoke quietly. "Son, I don't know what's going on here, but something doesn't feel right about this arrest. You seem like a smart young man. Is there anything you want to tell me?" Marcus considered his options. He could mention his father's wealth and connections, but something told him that Sergeant Williams was the kind of officer who would do the right thing regardless of who his family was. "Sergeant, I was profiled, harassed, and arrested for no reason other than the color of my skin." Officer Sullivan made that very clear with his comments and his actions. She nodded slowly. I've been watching Sullivan for a while. This isn't the first complaint we've had about his methods. Then why is he still on the street? Sergeant Williams's expression darkened. Because complaints get buried, witnesses get intimidated, and the union protects officers like Sullivan. But maybe this time will be different. Before Marcus could ask what she meant, the sound of expensive cars pulling up outside caught their attention. Through the window, Marcus could see 3 black SUVs with tinted windows parking in formation in front of the station. Looks like your ride is here, Sergeant Williams said with a slight smile. The first person through the station doors was David Thompson, and his presence immediately commanded attention. At 55, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had built an empire from nothing. His tailored suit probably cost more than most officers made in a month, but it was his eyes that made people take notice, intelligent, focused, and currently burning with controlled fury. Behind him came a woman in an equally expensive suit carrying a leather briefcase, followed by 2 men who were clearly security personnel. The entire group moved with the precision of people accustomed to handling crises. I'm David Thompson, he announced to the desk sergeant. I'm here about my son, Marcus Thompson, who was arrested this morning. The desk sergeant, who had been briefed by Sergeant Williams about the unusual nature of the arrest, immediately stood up. Yes, sir. Let me get the chief for you. That won't be necessary, came a voice from behind them. Chief Martinez had appeared, slightly out of breath and clearly nervous. Mr. Thompson, I'm Chief Martinez. I understand there's been some kind of misunderstanding. David Thompson's expression didn't change. There's been no misunderstanding, Chief. My son was racially profiled and falsely arrested. The only question is what you're going to do about it. The woman with the briefcase stepped forward. I'm Sarah Chen, Mr. Thompson's attorney. We'll need to see your son immediately, as well as all documentation related to his arrest. Chief Martinez nodded quickly. Of course. Right this way. As they moved through the station, Marcus could hear his father's voice getting closer. When David Thompson finally saw his son, still in handcuffs and sitting in the booking area, his composure cracked slightly. Marcus, he said, moving quickly to his son's side. Are you all right? I'm fine, Dad, Marcus replied, though the relief in his voice was evident. David Thompson turned to Chief Martinez, his voice deadly quiet. Why is my son still in handcuffs? I'll have them removed immediately, the chief said, signaling to Officer Martinez, who quickly produced the keys. As the handcuffs came off, Marcus rubbed his wrists, which showed clear red marks where the metal had bitten into his skin. Sarah Chen immediately took photos with her phone. We'll need medical documentation of those injuries, she said to the chief. Now, let's discuss what happened here, David Thompson said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Chief Martinez led them to a conference room, where Marcus recounted the events of the morning in detail. His father listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each revelation. Where is Officer Sullivan now? David Thompson asked when Marcus finished. He's in my office, the chief admitted. I want to speak with him. Mr. Thompson, I don't think that's advisable. Chief, David Thompson interrupted, let me be very clear about something. My son was arrested for the crime of being black in your city. The officer who arrested him made racist comments and used excessive force. Now, I can handle this quietly, through proper channels, or I can make it a very public discussion about the systemic racism in your department. The choice is yours. The threat was delivered calmly, but its implications were crystal clear. Chief Martinez had dealt with wealthy, connected people before, but never someone with David Thompson's resources and influence. I'll bring Officer Sullivan in, the chief said. When Sullivan entered the conference room, his swagger was noticeably absent. He'd clearly been briefed about who David Thompson was, and the reality of his situation was beginning to sink in. Officer Sullivan, David Thompson said, standing to face him. I understand you arrested my son this morning. Sullivan glanced nervously at the chief before answering. Yes, sir. He was acting suspiciously and became belligerent when questioned. Belligerent how? He refused to cooperate with our investigation. Marcus spoke up. I showed you my ID, I had a receipt for my purchase, and I answered all your questions. When I asked to leave, you arrested me. You were resisting. I never physically resisted, Marcus interrupted. I questioned the legality of your detention, which is my constitutional right. Sarah Chen opened her briefcase and pulled out a tablet. Officer Sullivan, are you aware that the store where this incident occurred has security cameras? Sullivan's face went pale. Yes, ma'am. And are you aware that several bystanders recorded the incident on their phones? Some people were recording, yes. Then you'll be interested to know that we've already obtained copies of both the security footage and the cell phone videos. Would you like to revise your statement about what happened? The room fell silent. Sullivan looked desperately at Chief Martinez, but found no support there. The chief was already calculating the damage this was going to do to his department. Officer Sullivan, David Thompson said quietly, my son is a good young man. He's never been arrested, never been in trouble with the law. He's a student athlete with a bright future ahead of him. And you tried to destroy that because you saw a black man and assumed he was a criminal. Mr. Thompson, I was just doing my job. Your job is to protect and serve all citizens equally, David Thompson cut him off. Instead, you profiled, harassed, and assaulted my son. And now you're going to face the consequences. Chief Martinez cleared his throat. Mr. Thompson, I want to assure you that this incident will be thoroughly investigated. Officer Sullivan will be suspended pending the outcome of that investigation. Suspended? David Thompson's voice rose slightly. Chief, let me explain something to you. My company employs over 2,000 people in this city. We pay millions in taxes annually. We've donated millions more to local charities and community programs. And we've done all of this because we believe this was a community that shared our values of equality and justice. He paused, letting the implications sink in. If this incident is not handled properly, if Officer Sullivan is not held fully accountable for his actions, then my company will have to reconsider our relationship with this community. That means jobs, tax revenue, and community investment. All of it will be on the table. The threat was delivered calmly, but its impact was devastating. Chief Martinez understood immediately that this wasn't just about one arrest anymore. This was about the economic future of the city. What would you consider proper accountability? The chief asked. Sarah Chen answered. Officer Sullivan should be terminated immediately. The department should implement mandatory bias training for all officers. And there should be a public acknowledgement that this arrest was unjustified and racially motivated. Sullivan finally found his voice. You can't destroy my career over this. I have a family to support. Marcus looked at him steadily. You should have thought about that before you decided to destroy mine. I wasn't trying to destroy anything. I was just. You were just what? Marcus interrupted. Just doing your job. Your job is to protect people like me, not terrorize them. You had no probable cause to detain me, no evidence of any crime, and no justification for your actions other than the color of my skin. David Thompson placed a hand on his son's shoulder. Marcus, let me handle this. He turned back to Chief Martinez. Chief, I'm going to make this very simple for you. You have two choices. You can do the right thing voluntarily, or you can do it after I've made this the biggest news story in the state. Either way, justice will be served. The chief looked around the room, taking in the determined faces of the Thompson family and their attorney, the nervous expression of Officer Sullivan, and the growing crowd of media outside the station windows. Officer Sullivan, he said finally, you are hereby terminated from the Riverside Heights Police Department, effective immediately. Sullivan's face went white. Chief, you can't. I can and I have. Turn in your badge and weapon. Security will escort you out. As Sullivan was led away, his career in ruins, David Thompson turned to his son. Are you ready to go home? Marcus nodded, but then looked at Chief Martinez. Chief, this can't be the end of it. Officer Sullivan is gone, but the system that protected him for 15 years is still in place. What about the next Marcus Thompson who doesn't have a billionaire father to make phone calls? The question hung in the air, challenging everyone in the room to think beyond this single incident. Chief Martinez nodded slowly. You're right. This is bigger than one officer or one arrest. We need to do better. Then prove it, Marcus said. Don't just fire Sullivan. Change the culture that created him. 3 months later, the Riverside Heights Police Department had implemented the most comprehensive police reform program in the state. The Thompson Foundation, David Thompson's charitable organization, had partnered with the department to fund bias training, community outreach programs, and a civilian oversight board with real power to investigate complaints. Officer Sullivan, meanwhile, had been unable to find work in law enforcement anywhere in California. The video of his arrest of Marcus Thompson had gone viral, making him a symbol of everything wrong with policing in America. He'd been forced to move out of state and take a job in private security, earning a fraction of his former salary. Marcus Thompson had returned to UCLA for his senior year, where he continued to excel both on the basketball court and in the classroom. But the incident had changed him, giving him a deeper understanding of the challenges facing young black men in America, regardless of their family's wealth or status. The story of his arrest had made national news, sparking conversations about racial profiling and police accountability across the country. Marcus had used his platform as a college athlete to speak out about these issues, becoming an advocate for criminal justice reform. The thing people don't understand, Marcus said during a television interview 6 months after the incident, is that my father's money didn't protect me from being profiled and arrested. It only protected me from the consequences of that arrest. There are thousands of young black men who go through what I went through, but they don't have billionaire fathers to make phone calls. They end up with criminal records that follow them for the rest of their lives. The interviewer nodded. What would have happened if your father hadn't been able to intervene? Marcus thought for a moment. I probably would have been charged with resisting arrest and disorderly conduct. I might have been kicked off the basketball team. My scholarship could have been revoked. My entire future could have been destroyed because one officer decided I looked suspicious. And now? Now I understand that privilege isn't just about having money. It's about having the power to demand justice when you're wronged. And I have a responsibility to use that privilege to help others who don't have it. The interview had aired on a Sunday evening, and by Monday morning, it had been viewed millions of times online. The hashtag Justice for Marcus had trended on social media, but Marcus had asked people to change it to Justice for All, emphasizing that his story was just one example of a much larger problem. David Thompson had watched his son's transformation with pride and concern. Pride because Marcus was using his experience to make a positive difference in the world. Concern because he knew that speaking out would make Marcus a target for those who preferred the status quo. Are you sure you want to keep doing these interviews? David asked his son during one of their weekly phone calls. Dad, you taught me that with great privilege comes great responsibility, Marcus replied. I can't just pretend this didn't happen and go back to playing basketball like nothing changed. I know. I'm proud of you. I just worry about the backlash. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Dad, do you remember what you told me when I was little? About why you worked so hard to build the company? I said I wanted to create opportunities for people who looked like us. Exactly. Well, this is my opportunity to create change for people who look like us. I can't waste it. The conversation had taken place on a Thursday evening. By Friday morning, Marcus had received a call that would change everything again. Marcus, this is Agent Jennifer Walsh with the FBI's Civil Rights Division. We'd like to speak with you about Officer Sullivan and the Riverside Heights Police Department. The investigation that followed revealed that Sullivan's case was not isolated. The FBI had been building a case against the department for years, documenting a pattern of civil rights violations that went far beyond one officer's actions. Marcus's arrest, and the media attention it generated, had given them the final piece they needed to move forward with federal charges. The day the FBI announced its investigation, Marcus was in his dorm room studying for finals when his phone rang. It was his father. "Have you seen the news?" David asked. "About the FBI investigation?" "Yeah, I just saw it." "How do you feel about it?" Marcus thought for a moment. "Vindicated, I guess. But also sad. Sad that it took my arrest to expose something that's been going on for years. Sad for all the people who were hurt before me and didn't have the resources to fight back. You know this is going to get bigger, right? The media attention, the scrutiny. Are you ready for that?" "Dad, I stopped being ready for any of this the moment Officer Sullivan put those handcuffs on me. But I'm going to see it through, because someone has to." The federal investigation ultimately led to a consent decree requiring the Riverside Heights Police Department to operate under federal oversight for 5 years. 17 officers, including 3 supervisors, were terminated for civil rights violations. The department was required to implement comprehensive reforms, including new training programs, revised use of force policies, and an independent monitor to ensure compliance. Officer Sullivan was indicted on federal civil rights charges and eventually pleaded guilty to violating Marcus's constitutional rights. He was sentenced to 2 years in federal prison and banned from working in law enforcement for life. But perhaps the most significant change was cultural. The Thompson Foundation's partnership with the police department had created a model for community police relations that was being studied and replicated across the country. Young officers were being trained not just in tactics and procedures, but in empathy and cultural competency. Marcus Thompson graduated from UCLA with honors and was selected in the first round of the NBA draft by the Los Angeles Lakers. But even as his professional basketball career took off, he continued his advocacy work, using his platform to speak out about criminal justice reform and racial equality. During his rookie year, Marcus established the Equal Justice Initiative, a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing legal assistance to young people who had been wrongfully arrested or charged. The organization's first case involved a 17-year-old black student who had been arrested for walking while black in a wealthy neighborhood where he was visiting friends. "Every time I step onto a basketball court," Marcus said during his first press conference as a professional athlete, "I'm reminded that I'm living a dream that almost didn't happen. If my father hadn't been able to make that phone call, if I hadn't had the resources to fight back, my life could have taken a very different path. I'm using my platform to make sure other young people don't have to depend on luck or wealth to receive equal treatment under the law." The reporter who had asked the question nodded. "Some people say you should focus on basketball and stay out of politics. What's your response to that?" Marcus smiled. "Basketball is what I do. Fighting for justice is who I am. And I learned a long time ago that the two don't have to be mutually exclusive." 5 years after his arrest, Marcus Thompson was an all-star player, a successful businessman, and one of the most respected voices on social justice issues in America. The convenience store where it all began had become an unlikely pilgrimage site for activists and reformers, with Mr. Park proudly displaying a photo of Marcus on the wall behind the counter. Officer Sullivan, meanwhile, had served his prison sentence and was working as a night security guard at a warehouse outside Phoenix, Arizona. He'd lost his pension, his reputation, and his family. His wife had divorced him during the federal investigation, taking their 2 children with her. On the 5th anniversary of Marcus's arrest, a reporter tracked Sullivan down for a follow-up story. The former officer, now 52 and looking much older, agreed to a brief interview. "Do you regret what happened that day?" the reporter asked. Sullivan was quiet for a long moment. "I regret a lot of things. I regret that I let my prejudices cloud my judgment. I regret that I hurt a good young man who didn't deserve it. I regret that I threw away my career and my family for what? For the satisfaction of putting someone in their place who didn't need to be put anywhere." If you could speak to Marcus Thompson today, what would you say? I'd say I'm sorry. I'd say he was right to fight back, and I was wrong to think I could get away with treating him the way I did. And I'd say that I hope the changes that came from what I did wrong will prevent other officers from making the same mistakes. The interview was published online and quickly went viral. Marcus Thompson, now 27 and in his 5th NBA season, was asked about it during a press conference. I appreciate Officer Sullivan's apology, Marcus said. But apologies don't undo the damage that was done, not just to me, but to countless others who didn't have the resources to fight back. The real test of his remorse will be whether he uses his experience to help prevent other officers from following the same path. Do you forgive him? Marcus considered the question carefully. Forgiveness is a process, not a moment. I'm working on it. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean accepting that what happened was okay. It means choosing not to let anger consume you while still demanding accountability and change. The reporter pressed further. Some people say your arrest was the best thing that could have happened, because it led to so much positive change. How do you respond to that? Marcus's expression hardened slightly. I would never say that being racially profiled and falsely arrested was the best thing that could have happened to me. What I will say is that I'm grateful I was able to turn a traumatic experience into something positive. But let's be clear, the goal should be to prevent these incidents from happening in the first place, not to hope they lead to good outcomes. As the press conference ended, Marcus reflected on how much his life had changed since that morning when he'd simply wanted to buy a bottle of water. He'd learned that privilege was both a shield and a responsibility, that justice was not automatic but had to be fought for, and that real change required sustained effort, not just momentary outrage. The young man who had been handcuffed outside a convenience store had become a symbol of resistance and reform. But more importantly, he had become living proof that one person's courage to stand up for what's right could create ripples of change that extended far beyond their own experience. Today, the Riverside Heights Police Department is considered a model for community policing. Crime rates have decreased, community trust has increased, and the department has not had a single civil rights violation in over 3 years. The Thompson Foundation continues to fund police reform initiatives across the country, and Marcus Thompson continues to use his platform to advocate for justice and equality. The convenience store where it all began still stands on Maple Street, but it's no longer just a place to buy water and snacks. It's a reminder that change is possible, that justice can prevail, and that sometimes the most powerful response to injustice is not violence or revenge, but the determination to ensure that what happened to you never happens to anyone else. Marcus Thompson learned that day that being black in America meant that your rights were not guaranteed, regardless of your education, your achievements, or your family's wealth. But he also learned that having a voice, and the courage to use it, could be more powerful than any badge or uniform. The story of his arrest became a catalyst for change not because his father was a billionaire, but because he refused to accept that what happened to him was acceptable. In the end, it wasn't money that brought justice, it was the unwavering belief that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of the color of their skin. And that's a lesson that extends far beyond the walls of any police station or the boundaries of any city. It's a reminder that justice is not a destination but a journey, and that each of us has a role to play in making sure that journey leads toward equality for all.